Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Just wanted to take a moment to update you guys on the results of my second check ride that I took to essentially retest and make sure I passed the parts that I failed on my initial check ride. So for those of you who might have seen my first video, you'll know that I failed the initial check ride in the last 15 minutes of the actual test. So for those of you who had actually tuned into my last video, you'll know that I failed two maneuvers on my first check ride. One was my short field takeoff and two was my soft field takeoff. And the reason for that failure was actually a training miscommunication or a POH interpretation discrepancy, we'll call it. And I had actually used an incorrect flap configuration for that, which if you want to go ahead and take a look at the video previously, you'll kind of get more details on what happened there. But essentially, I had used 10 degrees flaps for a short field and no flaps for a soft field, which is the way that the POH read to my instructor, myself, and the owner of the actual aircraft, but the DPE had a differing opinion. So at the end of the day, she had to disapprove of the maneuver, and ultimately I had to actually retest. So that's not that big of a deal. Obviously it's a critical phase of flight, so that is a big deal, but the overall retest was going to be about 20 minutes, which ultimately is exactly what it ended up taking. So on my retest day, which actually was the 29th of December, I went back up to Ramona, KRNM, for those of you that are familiar with the airport. And I had actually retested by simply picking her up, doing 2 takeoffs and 2 landings. And I didn't get a chance to actually finish the test because I already had to do 2 landings, and I had a forward slip to landing that was remaining, as well as a short field landing as well. So she said, you know what, instead of actually having you perform those maneuvers, we're going to have 2 landings anyway. Upon your retest, we'll just have you do one of those 2 maneuvers for each of the landings that you do. So anyway, went up there, and this was at 10 o'clock. Beautiful day, 10 miles of visibility, winds were calm, they were variable, had plenty of runway length to work with, and this is again when the C-150, and so picked her up and went through the emergency procedures again. She had me essentially perform the passenger briefing, and I went up and got everything ready during the run-up. During the run-up, there were a number of flocks of geese that were actually crossing over the departure end of the runway, and so we actually got stuck there for about 20 minutes at the hold short line, just waiting for bird activity to clear from the area so that way we could actually perform the maneuvers safely. Once that had passed, we went ahead and took off. She had me start with a soft field takeoff. So for those of you who might not be familiar with what that is, that's when you hold the yoke full aft, and you keep yourself rolling until you establish yourself on center line, and then you start to relieve some of the back pressure while keeping that nose wheel slightly off the ground, and essentially full power forward, remaining ground effect once you actually get off the ground because you're taking off at a lower airspeed. And again, as a reminder, 10 degrees flaps in my particular aircraft. And then once you actually have reached a positive rate of climb and a safe altitude, you go ahead and feather out those flaps there and essentially resume normal climb at VY. And so did that flawlessly. She was very pleased with the maneuver, entered a left traffic pattern, and she had me go ahead and perform the forward slip to landing. So this part was actually kind of funny because I went in the left traffic pattern. As soon as I was at my touchdown point, runway 27, I had been sequenced as actually number 2 in the pattern for traffic separation, and as soon as I was approved for my base turn, turned my base, and she goes, "You look a little high." And I said, "Yeah," and I said, "I'm going to be doing a forward slip," and I said, "So I'm going to need a little bit of extra altitude to take it all the way down to the runway." She said, "Okay, you're the pilot in command." She goes, "I'll trust your judgment." And so I squared off for my final and began my slip. By the time I actually made the base turn, I was actually pretty high. And she said, "You know, you look pretty high." She goes, "Are you going to be able to do this maneuver?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "Okay." She goes, "You're the pilot in command." She goes, "Where are you going to touch it down?" And knowing that I was high and my normal aiming point being the numbers, I told her that my touchdown point was going to be the first 1,000-foot marker. So I entered the forward slip. In this case, took a peek at the windsock. It was a slight quartering headwind from the right, and so I put right aileron in, a left rudder, and ended up forward slipping it in while maintaining my center line, took it all the way down to about 50 feet off the actual runway, straightened out my rudder, and landed it right on the 1,000-foot marker. So she was very pleased with that. We actually had requested a short stop and go on the runway, so we actually stopped the aircraft, put it, cleaned up the airplane essentially, put it in configuration for a short field takeoff, and essentially applied the brakes. No flaps this time, obviously, and full power. Verified power was good. Checked my engine gauges, oil temp and pressure were good, and released the brakes and took off. At this time, takeoff went fantastic. Plenty of power to climb. Went at VX until the 50-foot obstacle, and then lowered the nose to VY and continued my climb out. And one more lap in the pattern, I come back, she says, okay, let's go ahead and do a short field landing this time. And so I did my short field landing. She said, where are you gonna put it? I said, the second stripe is where I was aiming for, which actually I was pointing the nose towards the numbers. That's kind of where I was going for, just because I knew if I had a little bit of float that I'd have some time to correct if need be. And brought it down. Wind started gusting a little bit, again being variable, and so it was a little bit of a fight on the way down there, but everything went really great. Ended up touching it down right on the marker, and she said, congratulations, you're a pilot. And honestly guys, having failed the first time and having that huge hit to my ego was definitely something that took a big chunk out of my pride, but ultimately I do believe that it's these experiences that make us better pilots. And you know, you can walk away with this with two different attitudes. You can be bitter and you can be sour towards the actual examiner, and you can, you know, kind of move on in that direction. But I took accountability for my mistake. I found a learning inside of the opportunity, which was to ask your examiner if you have any questions about the interpretation in the book. You know, before you actually do your check ride, clarify what they're going to want to see from you and have them review that before you actually start the practical portion. But you know, all went well. I ended up passing my exam, and officially as of December 29th, 2019, I am a private pilot. So very proud of myself. I started my training March 18th, and my first flight ever was actually January 28th, but I hadn't actually started my official training until then. In a short 9 months, only flying once or twice a week, maybe at maximum, I was able to pass my private pilot exam, and now I'm officially able to fly. So if you haven't already seen it, I posted a video of me taking up my 8-year-old son. All the video work by him, of course. I did a little bit of the editing, but he had a blast. I took up my 12-year-old son and my 13-year-old daughter as well too for the first flight with Dad, and they're stoked. My wife is going to be going up with me here pretty soon as her work schedule permits, and I've already actually purchased through the kingschools.com website the career package, so I'm actually on my way to my instrument training, my commercial, my multi-engine, and my CFI ratings and ATP as well. So I'm right onto the training path. Again, for those of you who joined me earlier in the videos that I posted, my goal is to take this into a commercial aviation career. And so the training doesn't stop here. Really, it's just a license to learn, and I'm really looking forward to it. So if you guys have any questions or any comments, please post them below. I appreciate it if you guys like and subscribe to my videos. It really helps motivate me to continue posting this content for you guys. If you find this helpful, great. If not, I'm open to your feedback. And if you guys want me to cover any particular subjects, please, again, post those in the comments below. And fly safe, everybody, and I hope you guys have a great day.